All right, today we're going behind the scenes, behind enemy lines, really, to talk about a battle your body is fighting right now. We're calling it the Invisible War, the war against pathogens.
Think about that for a second. What if you were in a war, but you couldn't even see the enemy? I mean, it sounds like something out of a movie, right? But that is exactly the situation we're in every single day. Our world is just teeming with these microscopic invaders all trying to breach our defenses. So the big question is, how do you fight an enemy you can't see? Well, let's get into it.
Okay, so first things first, you've got to know your enemy, right? In this particular war, the bad guys are this really diverse group of organisms we call pathogens. So what exactly is a pathogen? Well, to put it simply, it's any organism that can make you sick. That's it. It's kind of like a big umbrella term for all the tiny things that cause disease. You can almost think of them as different factions in a huge invading army.
All right, first up in this army, we've got the viruses. These guys are the ultimate hijackers. They're behind everything from, the common cold and the flu, to way more serious stuff like measles and AIDS. The crazy thing is, they actually need our cells just to make more of themselves.
Then you've got the bacteria. Now, these single-celled organisms are literally everywhere. And look, a lot of them are totally harmless, even helpful. But the ones that are pathogens, yeah, they're responsible for some really nasty illnesses like cholera, tuberculosis, and tetanus.
Next up is a group you might not be as familiar with, but they are just as dangerous. They're called protists. Now, these are more complex single-celled organisms, things like protozoa, and they can cause some absolutely devastating diseases. We're talking about things like malaria and amoebic dysentery. And rounding out our list of invaders, we have fungi. Now, I know when you hear fungi, you're probably thinking about mushrooms, right? But the pathogenic kind, well, they're the ones behind those really common and super annoying conditions like athlete's foot and ringworm. So, okay, we've met the main players. We know who the invaders are. But how do they actually launch their attack? Because if we can understand how they spread, well, that's the key to stopping them in their tracks.
It really boils down to two main strategies they use. First, there's direct contact. This is pretty straightforward. The pathogen passes from person to person through body fluids, like how HIV is transmitted. But here's the really important part. Most of the time, transmission happens through indirect contact. That's where the pathogen uses something else, like the air or water, as a vehicle to get from one person to the next.
And believe me, these invaders are incredibly clever about how they travel. They can ride on tiny droplets in the air when someone coughs or sneezes, they can contaminate our food and our water, they can hang out on surfaces we touch, and they can even hitch a ride on insects like mosquitoes carrying malaria.
Okay, so it might sound like we're just hopelessly outnumbered here, right? But the good news is our bodies are anything but defenseless. In fact, your body is like this amazingly well-designed fortress, built specifically to fight off these exact kinds of attacks.
So, the first line of defense? Well, those are the mechanical barriers. You can think of these as the actual walls of our fortress. They're the physical structures whose whole job is to make it super difficult for any pathogen to even get inside in the first place.
But what happens if an invader actually manages to breach those walls? Well, that's when they run into our second line of defense, the chemical barriers. Now, you should think of these like deadly traps scattered around the fortress, substances our body produces to kill off pathogens before they can really set up shop. And this really shows you how it all works together perfectly. I mean, look at this. Our skin, that's the main outer wall, right? If you get a cut, a blood clot forms almost instantly to seal that gap. The hairs in your nose, they're like filters, catching pathogens from the air you breathe. You've got mucus in your airways that acts like sticky flypaper, trapping bacteria. And then you swallow it, and it goes down into your stomach where this incredibly powerful hydrochloric acid just destroys them. It's an amazing system. But, okay, what if a few sneaky invaders manage to get past all of that? Well, that's when the body calls in the special forces, our white blood cells. Seriously, these are the elite soldiers. Some of them perform something called phagocytosis, which is just a fancy way of saying they literally eat the invaders. They just engulf and digest them. Then you have other white blood cells that produce antibodies. These are like little smart tags that latch onto pathogens, clump them all together, and basically mark them for destruction. It's incredible. So, yeah, our body's natural defenses are absolutely incredible. But here's the thing. We're not just passengers in this fight. The choices we make every single day, that's our personal strategy for victory. So let's talk about how we can help reinforce those amazing defenses.
In this strategy, it's a battle on multiple fronts. We're talking about things like having a clean water supply. making sure we prepare food hygienically, just practicing good personal hygiene, and even things like proper waste disposal and sewage treatment. Every single one of these things helps to break a potential chain of transmission before it can even start.
Let's zoom in on food prep for a second, because this is something we can all control. It's a really simple 4-step plan. Step 1. Keep your cold food cold. That slows down how fast pathogens can reproduce. Step 2. Wash your hands and your surfaces. This gets rid of any contaminants. Step 3. Cook food all the way through. That heat will kill bacteria and fungi. And finally, Step 4. Cover your food. This stops flies and other pests from landing on it and recontaminating everything.
And then there's personal hygiene. You can think of this as your daily defense drill. You know, we're always told to wash our hands with soap, and there's a good reason for that. It's so effective because the soap doesn't just rinse off the pathogens, it actually helps remove the oils and dirt on your skin that the pathogens are clinging to. It's such a simple action, but it has a massive, massive impact.
And what about those airborne threats? Well, just a little bit of respiratory etiquette can be a surprisingly powerful weapon. When you sneeze or cough, catch it in a tissue. That contains the whole spray of those infectious droplets. But, and this is the crucial part, you have to get rid of that tissue right away. Because those pathogens, they can still be alive and kicking on there.
So what's the big takeaway from all of this? Look, the reality is we are surrounded by these invisible threats all the time. But, and this is the most important part, we are not helpless, not even close. Just understanding how these pathogens work, how our own bodies fight back, and how much our daily choices matter, that's what gives us the power to protect ourselves and everyone around us. Because in this invisible war, knowledge really is your best shield.
And that brings me to a final question for you. Now that you've seen the battlefield, now that you know the strategies, what's one small thing you're going to do differently today to help win this invisible war?